and welcome to Soulful. All right. Hello again, and welcome. My name is Drew, and this is Soulful. And in this episode, I'm going to be sharing a little bit about practical spirituality, which is a favorite term of mine. Because what I've found, over the course of my journey is that there are a variety of different spiritualities, some more or less practical, according to me, whoever I think I am. And whoever it is that I am prefers, a much more practical, grounded spirituality. So we'll be sharing a little bit about that here in this episode. And I feel like this content flows nicely out of the last episode, talking about the Sweat Lodge. Because the Sweat Lodge is very much a practical, grounded spirituality. There is not a lot of fluff or lofty or escapist kind of vibes, which I have found to be, that kind of energy shows up frequently in a earlier or maybe a more immature expression of spirituality. And I'll share about all that here shortly. So a little bit on early spirituality, I think, to kick things off will be good. And then transitioning into talking about, deeper or a more mature expression of spirituality. Again, just according to whoever this guy is and my experiences. So feel free to disagree or holler at me. But just know that I've already recorded this, so you're just hollering into the abyss. So let's start with talking about some earlier spirituality energy. And I'm definitely, hopefully, not coming off as above or judging with this. Really, I'm just sharing from my experience how I honestly see and understand my experiences over time. But sometimes I'm judgy and don't know it, so it could happen. But I think early spirituality, what I've seen for myself and for others, is rarely noble. Maybe curious, maybe there's some intrigue or some curiosity that is part of the recipe, but more often than not, the vast amount of motivation that is involved in early spiritual seeking or early spirituality is avoidant, escapist, and just folks not trying to deal with whatever it is that's in their life, that's providing some sort of adversity or challenge or difficulty. And that was definitely the case for me. I'd always been intrigued and interested in spiritual stuff, and I read Siddhartha in middle school and had a vague awareness of Buddhism or spiritual stuff, as a kid, but no real connection, no actual practice or anything until years later, after a really rough addiction period. I spent about 6 years in hell, multiple addictions, and then miraculously came out of that. And so in early recovery, my spirituality exploits and my spiritual seeking was totally me trying to find a high that didn't come with withdrawal or needing to be bailed out or hating myself or wanting to die, right? Like I still wanted to get high. I still wanted to escape my experience and escape myself, but I didn't want all the consequences. And so that's what I thought spirituality was. And yeah, and early spirituality for me was very much like concepts, theories, ideas, going down rabbit holes and wormholes and all kinds of holes. Right? And I thought I was like sticking my head in the universe, but really I was sticking my head in the sand. And there's a time and a place for that. I guess I'm a little judgy with it. Yeah. Now, with greater experience, right? Greater awareness. But yeah, at that time, that was totally necessary. And I think that it is a totally necessary and unavoidable stage of spirituality or coming home to ourselves or waking up or, whatever, to get totally lost in the ideas and the concepts and the theories, right? To buy all the books and to know all the theories and all the fancy words, right? Like it's a mind-based spiritual seeking, which totally makes sense because our whole life up until that moment or up until that season has been mind-based. And so, of course, we're going to seek spiritually with the mind. But as many of us can attest, you don't get too far spiritually if you're still minding about, even if it's spiritual minding, right? And these are all very technical terms. I'm just making up stuff and using language how I feel is appropriate. Yeah, early spirituality, frequently I have seen in myself and others to be escapist, right? Like trying to get away, avoidant, trying to avoid, whatever's going on in our lives, right? We're seeking some sort of relief or solution or help or alternate experience. And we usually do that early on through books, ideas, concepts, right? Like mind flavored and mind centric strategies. And I think that that's totally part of the game or part of the adventure, part of the journey, is to spend some time in that energy or that season. And then for some of us at some point, that no longer suffices. All right, like maybe we find some peace and ease and relief in a cool theory about astrology or a cool book about Buddhism or whatever. But at a certain point, the ideas stop delivering the peace and the ease and the relief. And if we'd like to continue on a path of spirituality or spiritual seeking or spiritual living, it has to be more about like what we're actually doing, the behaviors, the practices, the way we spend our time, what we focus on, what we invest our energy in. And for me, that's the threshold that then is a certain maturation of the spiritual journey. Right? It's no longer spiritually seeking through concepts and ideas to avoid pain and hardship and suffering, and more about integrating a spiritual orientation into how we are participating in our lives, day to day, moment to moment. Cool. Yeah, that sounds good. I got lots of cool ideas, but it's not always easy to put them into words. So for me, practical spirituality is how I'll refer to that more mature experience. Right? Because the mature spirituality, the deeper spirituality, whatever we want to call it, it's more grounded, it's more practical, it's a lived thing. It's not a like fantasized thing or a theorized thing. And really, the deeper we go into living like this, the less spirituality is a separate thing. Right? Because like early on in our journeys, usually we're trying to like seek spirituality, or we're trying to like get spiritual or do the spiritual things to then, have a spiritual result or change ourselves or, whatever it is. But deeper into the process, it's like the whole thing's spiritual. There is no separation. There's no difference. So it's like, all right, how do I just live as a human, right? Or as a spiritual being having a human experience? How do I live day to day, moment to moment, in alignment with what I really am, according to a certain frequency or certain wavelength or a certain radio station. So at that point, the game is different, right? Like deeper into the journey, it's more about how am I moving in each moment in a way that aligns with spiritual principles or, a certain frequency, and less about trying to go find something else. All right, let me check my notes because I got some stuff here written up. Yeah. And there is, in full honesty, there has definitely been some time spent in judgment of earlier, more immature spirituality for me. Yeah. Well, I mean, I trend towards being judgy. Like if I'm not home and centered and grounded and being what I really am, the version of me that's running around in the world peopling is is pretty judgmental and critical. So I've definitely spent some time judging other people's journeys. And, and it only brings me pain. Like, it doesn't matter how right I am. I'm still suffering as a result of being so right. So, yeah. And so, this is actually a cool example too. So like at a certain point in the journey, there were theories and concepts and teachings that was like, oh, you need to be compassionate and allow everyone their space and radical acceptance. And I could spit that. I could talk that talk. And I knew the words and the concepts and the teachers and the books. But but I was still miserable and critical and angry and not fun to be with, But now deeper into the process, there's much more of a recognition of like, oh, okay. In the moment when somebody does something silly, am I able to be present with my own thoughts, not react, right? With that initial judgment or, whatever noise is happening. And in that moment, be able to have a little more space, a little bit more compassion, right? So it's less theory and it's now much more application. It's much more practice. Can I put all the stuff I learned in those books into practice in my life? And this is a natural evolution of any learning, right? We go from concepts and theories into practical application. So it's the same thing with living a spiritual life or being on a certain frequency. And so if you also find that you tend to judge other people's spiritual journey for how unspiritual they are or how much less spiritual they are than you, you're not alone. We do it. It happens. I mean, I've done it this week. So there's no perfection attained by anybody, like real spiritual achievement, if you will, is a releasing of whoever would try to achieve things spiritually, right? Like the peace that is available in living spiritually oriented life isn't accomplished by, my separate self. Like Drew doesn't win the spiritual Olympics, right? Like the peace is available when there is a lessening or an absence of the Drew character and all its shenanigans. And I don't know, there's only a few special beings that I've encountered where there is totally no person home anymore, where it's just presence, just like raw life. And they usually write really cool books, and sometimes they're also killed, right? Because you can't have that much truth going on if the powers that be want to continue to manipulate shit. So, anywho, I feel like I'm on a tangent, but it feels appropriate. So, yeah, man, this whole thing's a journey for sure. And I think having a recognition and an understanding that there are phases and seasons and stages to this kind of learning and growth and development is really helpful. Now, we can twist it too, right? Because if we have a separate sense of ego that wants to establish itself in the world as a certain thing, we're going to want to claim cool statuses and achievements. And so then shit can get weird. But I don't know that, it doesn't have to be a competition. And if we check into, a different kind of space, we can just recognize that everything that grows has different phases and seasons, and they're all necessary. And when you plant something in the garden, it's got to grow roots first, and then it comes to the surface, and then it grows out and up and in whatever direction, and then it starts to blossom into fruits or flowers, right? And so we could judge one stage as better or worse than the others, but they're all necessary. If you don't have the roots, then the plant can't grow, and if the plant can't grow, then there is no blossoming. So from this perspective, it's kind of silly if you're in a plant growing or a blossoming phase to then judge the rooting stage of somebody else, right? Especially because we've all been there. Because, for me, like almost all of my growth in the direction of living authentically and being a spiritual being on a human trip, it's come as a result of pain and suffering and being a dummy and not knowing, right? And then stumbling into beautiful discoveries that then open new doors for new experiences. So it's easy to get caught up in measuring our spiritual achievement and attainment. And I frequently will find myself drifting into stories of, how I'm here and people are there and, they need to learn this and don't they know what I think I know, all that. But for me, that's just still part of my journey, is to like see through that and release that so I can hang out as what I really am and share the love and the peace and the ease and the grace that is my truest essence. So whether you're early in the journey and soaking up every concept, philosophy, theory, and book you can find, or you're later in the journey and you have successfully accomplished and achieved all the spiritual things. All right. Either way, it's all silly, but it's all necessary, And each stage brings with it blessings and then also reveals new areas and room for growth. And for me, ultimately defining or measuring spirituality by a certain degree of practicality has proven to be really helpful through multiple stages of my journey. And a phrase that I love from recovery is, if it's not practical, it's not spiritual. All right? Like if you're lost in a story or a theory or a philosophy, there's a pretty good chance that you might be tripping over yourself sometime soon, right? Or if you find yourself really like holding on to an idea or a concept or point of view, it's a dangerously solid ground to stand on that can then result in you being less compassionate or less present. So if you have cool concepts and theories, awesome. How do they show up in your life? What's the practical application of what you have learned and what you are learning? And if you have really cool experiences and evidence that you can draw from in your life, awesome. For me, I'm giving you a high five and gold stars on that. If you have lots of theories but not a lot of evidence as far as how you put it into play in your life, maybe that's what's next. And it does feel like ultimately living like this on this frequency is just constantly moving in the direction of being more and more present love, or like Ram Dass would say, compassionate awareness. And so that could be a cool metric too. Like, how often am I able to be present and aware? How often am I able to show up with some love in the moment, especially with the tough stuff? How often am I able to notice the initial reaction or response and take a beat, take a breath, and then move in a way that's intentional or in a way that's a little more heart-centered? And for me, that's practical spirituality, right? That's actually putting this stuff into practice in our lives. And I'm a little biased, but I do know of a pretty cool system for doing this kind of stuff. Yep. And there's a book coming out real soon. Or maybe it came out already. Depends upon when you're listening to this. Yeah. For me, though, the cornerstones are a practical, grounded approach to living in alignment with our deepest, truest, most honest expression of being. A practical, grounded spirituality. Because again, I believe that we are spiritual beings having a human trip or on a human trip. Right? So the core essence of us is spirit. And we can debate for days what that actually means, but again, I won't go mind with that. I'll just point to, like we know it in a deep way. We can feel it when we are really home. And that, maybe that's a better way to explain the spiritual word. Because spirituality, the word itself has been, it's been kind of warped. Yeah. I'm thinking back to some of the conversations we were having yesterday at the lodge too. You know, like if you're in your if you're in your white girl spirituality phase, and this could be any being, it doesn't matter genders, but we were just making fun of this stereotype. If you're in your like spiritual white girl, everything's astrology, crystals in every orifice, like if you're in that phase, manifesting abundance all the time, like that's cool. And that might be part of your trip. And maybe don't judge it as much as I am currently. But but my hope, my wish for all beings is that we come to a grounded, practical living of spirituality. But that's not even the right word. Yeah, it's just a grounded, practical living. Yeah. Right? Because if we're spiritual beings on a human trip, then all we got to do is live as a human in a grounded, practical way that's loving and compassionate. And that's the purest expression of spirituality, maybe. All right. Anything else here on my outline? Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. This would be a nice way to close. So I feel super grateful for the way I was introduced to spirituality through recovery. Because, like I said earlier in the episode, as a youngin', I was definitely intrigued and interested in spiritual stuff. Like there was always a pull or certain awareness present, but it wasn't integrated into how I lived. How I lived was more of a reactive mess for decades. Well, we'll say at least 2 decades. So to then fall into addiction, come out, find recovery, and be introduced to a very practical, grounded approach to living that was centered in and around spiritual principles saved my life. And I'm so grateful that that was like the dose of medicine I got. It wasn't about which Hindu god or goddess means this or that. It wasn't about what chapter of a book was true or not true. It wasn't about the theories or the philosophies or whatever. It was like, what do I do in the next moment to not want to die, to not get high, to not harm everyone in my life? right? Like, what do I do to not be a dumpster fire today? And that kind of motivation, and then the teachings that were offered through the 12-step program, yeah, it gave me such a beautiful foundation for living that has unfolded beautifully, miraculously, magically over and over again in wonderful ways over the last 18 years. Yeah, and if I hadn't had the real grounded dose of spirituality through the recovery process, through the 12-step program, I don't know that I would ever got clean or escaped the hell that was my mind at that time. And maybe I'm not alive today. And the value of that grounded approach to living according to spiritual principles, I didn't realize how cool it was until I spent my first summer at the Omega Institute in New York, which is, amazing place. So grateful for my time there. But my first summer there was, it was all the things. But specifically for this story, this anecdote, like my first summer there, a lot of that stuff, that like spiritual stuff, I didn't know anything about. Like I didn't know about chakras or whatever, or energies or kundalinis, or like all that stuff was so foreign to me. And like people knew all the gods and goddesses and which one had an elephant head, and which energy was aligned with which chakra, and they knew all the fancy Buddhist texts and how to pronounce those crazy unpronounceable names. And here I was, just some bonehead from New Jersey, less than 2 years clean, right? Like 2 years removed from wanting to die and getting high every day. And I didn't know any of that shit. Like I couldn't talk that talk. So I didn't know all the fancy names or theories or philosophies. But what I did know was to hold the door for somebody, right? To pause for a moment and see if anybody was around, hold the door. I knew to hang out after a class and help put the yoga mats away and clean up. I knew to go sit at the table with the person sitting alone, right? So that they weren't alone. They had somebody to interact with. Like I knew these very practical ways to connect deeply. And that to me were so much more valuable than whatever the god or the goddess was. And and I saw a lot of people around me in that environment who, they had the dreadlocks and they ate granola, but they didn't have a certain presence or certain awareness that I was blessed with through recovery. And so I will be forever grateful for the 12 steps and the folks that were there to scoop me up and bring me in and teach me and show me this way of living. So you don't need to know all the fancy stuff. You don't have to read all the books if you don't want to. You can just bring your attention to living this thing. But if for now, you're digging on the concepts and the theories, like jump into it, man. There's a whole flavor of yoga that's all about wrestling with the ideas and the theories and getting a really firm understanding. And what I've found is that we each need the understanding necessary to then lean into the process further. And so there's no sense in trying to rush to certain stages. Like trust your own journey, trust your own path, trust where you're at. And when the time's right, the flower blooms. When the time's right, you will be presented with the exact ingredients necessary to open up and blossom in a new way and step into, maybe a new chapter or a new season of your life. All right. It feels good. Feels a little preachy, but feels good. And so we will bring this episode and this wave to a conclusion. And as always, if you have questions, definitely feel free to reach out. If you want to connect and maybe do some collaborating on some of this kind of stuff, give me a buzz. That's what I'm here for. And, oh yeah, and maybe get yourself a copy of this fancy new book that's coming out. The Cornerstones, Investing in Authenticity, will be available on Amazon July 9th. Links to the page will be available all over my social medias. So if you feel inclined, I'd appreciate it. All right. Yeah, and I think that's it. Until next time, be gentle with yourself. Be kind with yourself. Share that gentle kindness and your loving, compassionate awareness with others as well as yourself. And I'll see you a little further down the road.